since you brought it up, I did think it was interesting, or maybe not what he said, but what he didn't say, what Max said about the penalty after the race. I mean, you talked to him. Um, like, what do
Yeah,
you take away from that?
From Max Verstappen's calculated silence to McLaren's rising threat, the F1 season just took a wild turn. Check this video out.
yeah, I thought it was very interesting. I wasn't actually in that press conference because, as we've mentioned on this podcast before, you have the choice between going to see the top three drivers or
Yeah,
going to see the team principals.
you got to divide and
And
conquer.
yeah, you have to make your choice, and it depends on what you're going to get afterwards from other people as well. So I wasn't there, but having read through the transcript, it was very interesting. So he was basically asked, as he always would be in those situations, give us an opinion on that penalty. Trying to kind of get an answer where clearly he wasn't happy with it. He said as much in the car over team radio that he wasn't happy with it, but as soon as he got out the car after the race, he wouldn't talk about it. And then when he talked to the wider press later on, he wouldn't talk about it either. And it was interesting. At first, he said it's because things get misconstrued and kind of taken out of context on social media. And then later in the same press conference, it was like, well, actually, it's also about the FIA and these new rules they have where basically if you say something that is considered to damage the reputation of the FIA, you can get a fine. And if you do it 3 times in a 2-year period, you can get a race ban. So I think it was Max being utterly livid with that penalty. I think he's actually wrong on that. I think it was definitely a penalty, but that's another conversation. But being absolutely livid about that penalty and then wanting to say something, but knowing that if he did say it, he could get himself into trouble with the FIA and therefore, pulled back and didn't quite go full guns on it. But yeah, I think that was interesting, but so true of Max as well. That he always believes he's in the right. The shame being here that it is important that we get those opinions out there. And if drivers don't think they can express those opinions because they're going to have a penalty, then it becomes a much duller sport, and we see a lot less of these drivers' personalities and what they really think.
Can we really blame Max for staying quiet? When the FIA's rules threaten race bans over honest feedback, it's no wonder even a fierce competitor like Verstappen thinks twice before speaking. Isn't it ironic that in a sport defined by risk-taking, speaking your mind is the biggest gamble? Why should a driver be penalized for expressing frustration over a call that could cost them a championship?
That's
And
an FIA problem.
it is absolutely an FIA problem. And yeah, and I think that whole set of rules around swearing, which is part of the same regulation, and also this idea that if you say something that could be harmful or damaging towards the stewards or the FIA, then you're going to get in trouble. I think we need to be clear that people are allowed to have opinions about a penalty or not. It's probably not going to be overturned because we know how difficult it is to get a penalty overturned in Formula One, but you should at least be able to say what you think about it because Max at that time, having been in the car, I'm pretty sure he felt that he shouldn't have been penalised. So, yeah, an interesting one, but all kind of just stuff bubbling away underneath. But again, if we're talking about mental strength and actually probably making the right choice in terms of not getting himself into trouble, Max was probably doing the right thing there.
Isn't the ability to speak freely about racing decisions a fundamental part of competitive sport? Max knew the penalty was harsh, but the fact he had to stay silent to avoid sanctions, what does that say about the FIA's priorities? This isn't just a Max issue, it's a Formula One issue. The FIA risks sterilizing the very personalities that make the sport compelling. Max is showing restraint not because he lacks opinion, but because the cost of honesty in this climate is just too high.
If you had to predict the driver and the Constructors' Championship right now, who would it be?
I'm going to stick with my preseason prediction.
I don't remember who you said.
Max Verstappen for the Drivers' Championship.
Okay.
Love that.
And Constructors' Championship, I can't see anyone beating McLaren. I mean, if one of you guys can give me a convincing argument that somebody other than McLaren is going to win the championship, then go for it. But I can't see past them, obviously, because they've got 2 drivers performing on a high level. But to the point, they might take points off each other and open the door for Max.
I did think you were going to say Max. I'm going to say Piastri, but I think he and Max will go to the wire. I don't think Lando will be in that fight with them. And McLaren. I'm the same as Lawrence. I don't think there's any world, unless there's a major turnaround, after Spain when when there's the clampdown on wings and stuff. Even then, I mean, McLaren are already so far ahead. Hard to see that changing.
I hate to be boring, but I'm gonna go with Piastri as well. Like, there's just something. There's always been something about him despite like the fact that he's still so young and like relatively inexperienced compared to everyone else, he's calm, cool, and collected. And a lot of times he seems unflappable. And if he is already this unflappable and already making those like moves like we saw in turn one, where he was being the aggressor, he was making the most aggressive, unflappable guy on the circuit do something, and he was forcing it. Like if he's already doing that, for lack of a better term, like clearly he has the balls to do this the rest of the season. And that might get edited out. I don't know. But like to me, like that there are some I said it to my husband when we were watching it. That lap one, turn one situation, we could come back to the end of the season and be like, that was the moment that Oscar won the championship.
Yeah.
Like there was part of me, you know, a couple of years ago where it was like in Miami, Max won the championship in Miami. Sergio had the chance. Sergio was on pole. Max had terrible qualifying effort. It was like an absolute chance for like the world to change. And then of course Max went on and won like every single race the rest of the season. In my opinion, that was the weekend that like Max won the championship. And it just, there was something about that this weekend to me for Oscar. And yeah, McLaren, like Aston's gonna pull it out.
Yeah.
No,
it's gonna happen.
Not gonna happen.
Piastri's got talent, no doubt. But are we really ready to bet against a 4-time world champion who thrives under pressure? Max has turned bad weekends into race wins. That's the kind of resilience you build over seasons, not headlines. It's easy to get swept up in the excitement of Piastri's aggression, but Max's consistency is unmatched. He's not just racing, he's managing the long game. And that's exactly why, when it comes to the championship, he remains the one to beat.
Nicole, quickly on that point, though, as well, I think you're spot on about the Max moment. And how many times did Lando come off second best in those moments with Max last year? So many times. I mean, I lost count how many.
Right.
I know, like, and it's slightly different off the line because Max had a bad start, Piastri a good one, but still decisive down the inside. You know, hugged the racing line. A lot of drivers
Because you
might
have
be like,
to be the bad guy.
Yeah, and it's like, look, like you said, he took a page out of the Max Verstappen 101. Said that's how I'm going to race you. And Lando, I think, struggled to do that last year. And I think already Piastri's kind of, I'm pretty sure that's the first time I can remember him properly sharing the same bit of road with Max. Maybe there's been a couple of occasions I'm missing, but decisively, flag in the ground saying, you know, this is how I race. So I completely agree with you. I think it was massive. And I think if we see Lando on track with Max soon, it'll be telling to see how he reacts to it.
Piastri showed flashes of Verstappen-style grit, but Max has lived in those high-stakes moments season after season. He's not just racing, he's redefining dominance, and every move from the grid reflects that influence. Isn't it telling that we judge new stars by how they hold up next to Max? One brave overtake doesn't make a season, and Verstappen's racecraft remains the gold standard.